Tech Sideline is presented by First Bank and Trust Company, the bank that puts you first. They can meet your banking and financing needs for personal, agricultural, business, commercial, mortgages, and so much more. Visit firstbank.com to learn more.
What does the Virginia Tech football roster look like after finding some new talent? We have your transfer portal recap on episode 466 of the Tech Sideline podcast, which starts right now. We're recording on Monday, January 19th, 2026 from the Tech Solutions Studio in the Virginia Tech Corporate Research Center. Today's episode is brought to you by Lunch Pail Ventures. I'm your host, Riley Klaus, and today to my left is lead analyst and columnist Chris Coleman. Across the way, our managing editor, David Cunningham, and to my right is senior staff writer, Andy Bitter. Producing the show behind the scenes, as always, is Mr. Nick Brown. Now, this podcast is going to cover everything transfer portal, but some news since the last podcast in terms of the transfer portal is Kamarian Morgan, a recruit from Baylor, is no longer going to be coming to Virginia Tech. Are there any ideas of maybe what happened in the situation and how much of an impact it holds on the team?
Yeah, it was something with admissions, and this is the second time this has happened in recent memory. When Fuente was here, Tech hosted a guy named Quincy Roche on a January visit, and he was basically committed to Virginia Tech and ready to move in and start playing football, and then admissions came in and said, nah, you can't get into school here. So he ended up going to Miami and then went to the NFL. I don't think he's in the NFL this year, but he was in the NFL up through 2024, had a 4 or 5 year career in the NFL. So this has happened to Virginia Tech at least a couple of times in this January transfer window, and it seems like it takes entirely too long. Like, Morgan committed to Virginia Tech like 2 weeks ago. How does it take so long to figure out that he's not eligible for Virginia Tech? My guess is like a lot of people go home for Christmas break and they just take 2 weeks off and don't do any work, and then Morgan, poor guy, we hear he was in Blacksburg already. Right? Moved in, basically. And then they said, no, you can't get into school here. So and unlike in the past when, coaches like Fuente or Beamer or whoever would just get annoyed by something like that, I kind of expect people are going to hear from James Franklin about this.
Well, wasn't it like the math credit? Wasn't that like a long running thing way back in the day about they kept so many guys from getting into school here? I mean, I have to imagine they knew, the coaching staff knew it was probably borderline coming in. I mean, they don't just take these guys and go, all right, they're good to come in. Like, they check their transcripts and see if grades or anything. And I mean, I guess it's a reminder that this is still college football, right? As professionalized as everything has become, there's still an academic component to this whole thing. And, if you can't get into the school for whatever reason, I don't know the specifics of this whole thing, then you can't get into the school and you can't play here. So it happens. It's college football, and they'll move on. But he was one of the few 4-stars, technically 4-star transfers that they had in the class. And I think that one hurts because he had a lot of upside coming in here from Baylor.
I mean, he's defensive end, and they've got Hilson still, the Missouri kid. But you kind of expected those guys to be two of the guys competing for those starting spots. So now you got to find something else, I think. I don't know. It's not like it's maybe one thing. I think if it was like Grunkemeyer, right? If it was your starting quarterback, I think this is a little bit more replaceable, but still, I mean, this is a guy that was probably going to play a key role for them.
The bigger thing is if Franklin and the staff had found out about this earlier,
correct,
Virginia Tech wasn't going to let him into school, would they have signed somebody else? I think the guy they signed this past weekend,
Curtis Jones.
I think they were going to take him either way because he's more of a linebacker type. But would Virginia Tech have taken another defensive end if they had found out earlier that Morgan wasn't going to get into school? That's the biggest question.
I believe Nick said it. Because of course Morgan was the guy who visited Virginia Tech and was with Franklin in first row in Castle behind the TV broadcast during the Stanford game, and I believe it was Nick who said, "Man, that Stanford game continues to look worse and worse."
Well, I mean, it's not over. I mean, you could still get guys from the portal at this point. I know school starts tomorrow. Class starts tomorrow for Virginia Tech. I think I have until the 26th to add classes. I believe that's the first day of my class is supposed to start. I think that's the last day that you can still add in the spring semester.
That's next Monday.
I believe so. Yeah. If there's school, based on this snow that's coming in. But like the portal, technically closed on the 16th, but then schools have 48 hours to process a person's name there, but it's business hours, business days. So they had Saturday, Sunday, Monday as a holiday. I think conceivably you could go up until Wednesday. You could still see names going into the portal for this whole thing. And just because they're not, if they're already out there, they can still sign with the school. So just because the portal is closed at this point doesn't mean that, portal activity is over with. So I don't know what kind of defensive ends could be in there at this point. It's kind of like Darian Mensah going into the portal on the last day with Miami. Duke is kind of like, well, what do we do now? I mean, you can still find somebody. You just don't have the entire portal time period to go and find a good player.
Yeah. Well, and you might see some Terrion Stewart kind of situations where guys are finishing up credits at their old school and don't enroll in the spring. They just enroll in the summer.
So although Morgan is not coming, as you mentioned, there still could be more additions, but we're going to lay out all of the additions the Hokies have made so far. And David, you briefly touched on it, but let's start at the premier position, the quarterback, where they brought in both Ethan Grunkemeyer from Penn State and Bryce Baker from North Carolina. How do you see this room playing out this season and for the future when they bring in these two guys?
Yeah, I think Grunkemeyer's their guy for 3 years, or at least they want him to be. I think that's an ideal situation where you bring in someone with starting experience who's put up pretty good numbers and who has 3 years of eligibility left. Now, he's still a very young player. It's not going to be like dominance right away at the position, but, I think he certainly is a talented passer. Completion percentage is really high. Now they designed some passing plays this past year for him that were a little bit easier and that got his completion percentage up. But, he's still a pretty accurate passer, can make any throw on the field. Bryce Baker is an interesting take. He was a top 100 player by Rivals in 03. He was a redshirt freshman. He put up huge numbers in high school. So I'm interested to see what he can do. You've got a couple of other redshirt freshmen that were already in the program, and then you've got Troy Hoon, who is enrolling right now, this January. So you're going to have 5 quarterbacks on the roster this spring.
I think it was interesting that both the in-state big schools landed 2 pretty well thought of quarterbacks in this whole thing. And Tech with Grunkemeyer and Baker is presumably the next guy in line there. And then UVA with Bo Perbula and Eli Holstein, who you look at that and you go, man, Holstein I thought could have started somewhere. Yeah. Baker with his pedigree as a high school recruit and things like that, I thought maybe he could have gone somewhere and gotten a starting job. So I think some schools are looking at this going, hey, yeah, we want a starter or a guy we think is the top guy, but even if it doesn't work out or he gets hurt, you don't want the season to just be lost at that point. You got to have some kind of backup option there. So I think they got 2 pretty good guys. With Grunkemeyer, I think the familiarity with this coaching staff, not just Franklin, Ty Howell, new offensive coordinator, Danny O'Brien was his quarterbacks coach at Penn State. I think all that helps. And if you want to have sort of a continuity of performance, I know he was at a different school doing it this year, but those guys come here and it's sort of the same teaching points that he's hearing. I think that should help him hit the ground running.
Yeah, and I think we've seen a lot of good stuff. I believe Chris is writing an article kind of analyzing Grunkemeyer coming this week, but he's a really good player and he improved a lot as a freshman, got better as the season went on. You look at that game against Indiana, and you guys mentioned on the other podcast the other day, where he basically had similar numbers, slightly better QBR than Fernando Mendoza, the Heisman Trophy winner. I mean, this kid is pretty good. He got better as the season went on. And I think Baker's interesting because he didn't play, but he was the guy that Bill Belichick rolled out in the Dean Dome when he first got introduced. And the thing about Baker is Baker went to East Forsyth in the Kernersville area. Danny O'Brien, the quarterback's coach, also went to East Forsyth.
Yeah, that's right outside of Winston-Salem.
And Keyshawn Brown, Tech's wide receiver, who transferred from Duke, also went to East Forsyth. Baker threw him passes. So there's a lot of some North Carolina connections in here as well. But Baker's a highly sought-after guy. I think they have kind of packed the quarterback room nicely. The tough part is there's a lot of inexperience in there. And say something were to happen in Grunkemeyer, where we've seen it happen to Kyron Jones the last couple of years, you have to be able to trust that guy. Do they trust Bryce Baker? Well, they're going to have to.
So they'll need some support around them. And let's talk about what the skill positions look like after some additions. They just brought in Bill Davis at the running back spot after having plenty of returners and upcoming freshmen. But then they went out and grabbed a lot of receivers and also a pair of tight ends from Penn State. Are there any guys that you think could make an instant impact on the offense among this group?
Keyshawn Brown for sure at wide receiver, starting slot. 107 receptions for 1,300 yards in his career at Duke. He's got 2 years remaining, so he's a guy not just for this year, but for next year as well. He's also a good punt returner, and I would expect him to step right in and win that job. Obviously not a very good big guy, but extremely productive. Like I said, 107 catches in his career, only 2 drops. That's going to be a breath of fresh air in a wide receiver room that hasn't had the surest of hands the last couple of years.
Yeah, and certainly Brown at receiver. I think Davis at running back is interesting. You get Marcellus Hawkins coming back. You got Overton coming off a redshirt year where he kind of stepped up at the late in the year. Those are 2 pretty strong returning guys. And then you add Davis to the group that might not be an exact clone of Terrion Stewart, but kind of close. 5'9", 225 is what he's listed as here. I don't think he has that breaking tackle ability quite like Terrion had last year, but Terrion also wasn't healthy for most of the year. So, we'll see if Davis is a bit more durable, but I think that gives you 3 pretty good options at the top of your running game there. And then the tight end spots, I think, they just haven't added a lot of tight ends in recent years. You have to go back a couple years. I think Zeke Wimbush was the last one they brought in on scholarship. Jarikus Harrison, comes in as a walk-on, now does very well. They sort of need to add to that room, especially losing Wimbush to the portal. Harrison St. Germain has been hurt, or was hurt for most of last year. So I think adding a talent at the top of it, like Luke Reynolds, pretty impressive. I know he hasn't quite developed yet and shown that on the field, but I think you take a chance on the potential there. And you add into a room that's got, Benji Gosnell, Hairston. I think that's a real solid room now with some, real upside for the future.
I don't know that the 2 Penn State receivers will play as much. Well, I'm interested to see where they factor in, but that's Exenor in Denmark. But Marlon Jackson, I think, is interesting because he's got a unique frame that nobody else on this Virginia Tech team does, maybe with the exception of Wiggins, but Chance Wiggins has been hurt. So Marlon Jackson, he's a guy been productive at Louisiana Tech. How does he kind of factor into the mix? I think he like Brown, they've got completely different skill sets, but this is a wide receiver room that lacks a lot of experience, lacks a lot of catches. And even the guys who played last year that got a lot of targets, they dropped a lot of balls. So adding 4 receivers, and plus 2 tight ends, I think there are a lot more pass catching options now for a pass-first quarterback.
And let me say that we should ignore Jackson's stats at Louisiana Tech. I looked up their quarterbacks, and they've used 3 different quarterbacks each of the last 2 years, either due to injury or incompetence. So he didn't exactly have a chance to put up huge numbers and everything like that. So I think they've evaluated what they feel like his talent level and not necessarily his production level.
And they needed help at receiver. You lose Cam Selden, who was sort of a pseudo receiver, kind of offensive weapon type guy that they use on screens and stuff like that. You lose Isaiah Spencer late in the process. So you got Aiden Green, who had 31 catches last year, Takai Heath, who had 22, and then you got to go way down the list here to find the next guy. Tucker Holloway left too.
Yeah.
So you needed some guys that could step in, because as much as you like the promise of people like Chance Wiggins, Keelan Adams, both those guys were hurt for all of last year. Completely lost year in terms of development for them on the field. Obviously stuff off the field that you can still progress at. Snook Peterkin is pretty young still.
And he's playing basketball. He's sitting at the end of Virginia Tech's bench. He's watching basketball. He's got a great view of ACC basketball games.
He's practicing, I'm sure, which is keeping him in great shape. But there's a lot of guys that need to develop in this receiving group. So getting somebody like Brown, who does have the history of stats, I think he steps right into a starting spot. It will be interesting to see who else could, typically they're going to start 3 receivers. I would imagine it's Green, Brown, and then who? Takai Heath.
I would say maybe Jackson.
Keelan Adams, Jackson maybe based on experience, but I don't know.
I think Denmark will actually beat out Heath for the second slot position. Heath just
Well, I don't think they marry those guys to one spot. I think they're a fan of moving guys around.
Yeah, they are, but with Heath's size, he's only a slot. Denmark's 5'11", 180. So if you're going to play two slots, there's only so much room for wide receivers because Franklin historically has played three tight ends, right? So you can only play so many receivers if you're going to play three tight ends, and there will be various formations and things like that. But I don't know. Heath dropped too many passes for my taste this past year. Plus, again, he's a guy who's always been hurt.
Yeah.
Right.
I look at this wide receiver room. They have 12 guys, and all but 4 of them are redshirt sophomores or younger, and a lot of them were highly touted recruits. I mean, they added Davion Brown as a true freshman, right? He's a highly touted guy.
Fat rat.
Yes, but at the same time, he's another. I mean, he and Cameron Sparks and Jeff Exner Jr. I mean, a lot of these guys have barely played. Like, you've got to have somebody with experience, and that is why you retain Fontel Mines. So you kind of keep that same coaching there. But I'm interested to kind of see how this whole thing shakes out because they got to have guys step up and produce.
Right, we're bound to see a fusion between returners and these new additions as the supporting cast. But one spot that the Hokies would love to have consistency is the offensive line. So they went out and grabbed some new talent from Power 4 programs, including plenty of Big Ten presence among this group. Are there anybody here in this group that could instantly start on day one?
Yeah, I think outside of starting quarterback, the priority for me would have been left tackle. And that's Logan Howland. He's got starting experience in the SEC. He's been a good pass blocker for Oklahoma. He was banged up a little bit this past season, so he didn't quite get to play quite as much. But this guy has proven he can play against SEC, defensive ends, and he's going to be a massive upgrade at left tackle. And that allows Johnny Garrett to get back to, I think, his more natural position of right tackle. So they've helped themselves out a lot there.
You just look at the number of offensive linemen they brought in, not even from the portal, from their signing class. Mm-hmm. I think it's 11 guys. I mean, that's a lot of beef coming into that room.
21 current scholarship offensive linemen on the roster.
Yeah, and I mean, you looked at the room last year, and they were just kind of trying to get by with what they had, and guys were injured the whole time, the whole season, basically running with the same starting 5. Once they could for the rest of the year, and not rotating anybody in. Now, a lot of these, 7 of the guys are high school signees, so there's always a question whether they contribute right away. There's always a size and strength question when it comes to high school linemen adjusting to the college level. They're not just bigger than everybody at this point. They have to learn how to use that size and get in a weight room and kind of figure things out. But a couple of these transfers, I think they step in and they compete right away for these spots. It'll be really interesting. I mean, I'm curious, Chris, where do you think? What would be your starting 5 on the offensive line right now?
I would say Howland at left tackle,
Garrett at right.
Probably, but this Justin Terry kid from Ohio State.
Yeah,
he was in the 2 deep at Ohio State this past year. As a redshirt freshman.
Well, here's the thing. At least they have options.
Right.
Last year, they had like 1.5 tackles.
Exactly right.
And they're like, we just have to go with it at this point.
And they didn't have a left tackle at all.
Right.
Like, they had to move Garrett over there, and he should be on the right side.
So you get Howland, you get Garrett, you get this Terry guy, you've got Aiden Lynch who's coming back.
Right.
You at least have some people that can work at those spots. You're not
you
like,
absolutely do.
If a tackle went down last year, they were just basically just like, we'll move Remack there and we'll just pray.
And you've got Cunningham who can play guard or tackle, who barely played last year.
If he's coming back, he's
assuming
he
gets his, I'm going to assume he gets his waiver.
I think he does.
Everybody gets a waiver.
His is like a straightforward like medical.
Right.
Like you just need to document it where he's not looking for like a 7th or 8th year or something weird like that. So I think Cunningham, Ganem is back. Brody Meadows is still here.
Missed the entire season.
Hurt all year, so I think he could factor in a guard.
Altuner starts at center.
Yeah, I just think there are more options there.
Yes.
I mean, what were they looking at last year? Brody Meadows was the 6th guy. He got hurt right away, never played.
Muskrat.
They
lost 3 of their top 7.
We didn't hear from Muskrat for the entire season.
They lost 3 of their top 7 before the season started.
Yeah, Muskrat got hurt, and Cunningham missed most of the year as well. I mean, when 3 of your top 8 are down right away, and then Garrett gets hurt, they're in even more of a world of hurt at that point. I mean, they just stood no chance with that offensive line. So I think there's at least more options, which is what you need because there will inevitably be injuries in the trenches there. It's always, somebody coming to hit you the side of the knee or something like that. Nobody's ever completely healthy on the offensive line by the end of the season. You're going to have more bodies there that can, take that beating.
Well, I think that is a group where Matt Moore's still there. Like you keep the consistency. And Chris wrote about this, I think, in his Friday Q&A the other day, that maybe you could have wanted to go a different direction in a coach. I'm blanking on the guy's name. Went to Florida. Troutwine. Yes, he was the Penn State offensive line coach, and maybe you want to bring him in. But Matt Moore's a good coach, and he's produced, and he just had a bad year because Virginia Tech had a bad year. And you look at Tomas Rimac, and I think that kind of tells you everything. But I look at the two big guys, Howland and Terry. They added. I mean, those are potentially two starting tackles for you. Like that's huge. Like Terry, I think he's a guy who he played for Matt Moore at West Virginia, then went to Ohio State and was back playing for Matt Moore. And he was kind of like a diamond in the rough. Like I think Rivals had him as like a 2-star guy. And Matt Moore found him and developed him, and he's good enough because he was on Ohio State's roster. So I'm curious to see what the level the guys take in this next year under Matt Moore. Plus, you add in a couple experienced guys, and they got Justin Bell from Michigan State too. I'm interested to see if he can factor in. They got a Penn State guy as well, a Troutman.
I think they'll probably start him out at center.
Yeah,
and can play some guard as well.
But when you've got 21 scholarship guys, man, I mean you got a lot of options now.
You can practice. They could barely practice last year at times with the injuries. They had what's his name? Jens Danielson. I think he was stepping in a couple times just to do some drills and stuff like that. I mean, they'd have to split them up like little 3-on-3 groups. I think it allows you to do more things even in practice, and that helps you on the field.
Yeah.
So huge emphasis on the trenches for the offensive side of the ball. But let's flip to the defense, where there are some new chess pieces for Brent Pry and company to work with. Are there any standout players in the front seven that might fill a role or really provide an impact?
I think the most talented player in this entire transfer class is Javian Hilson from Missouri. He was ranked in the top 80 by every recruiting service coming out of high school. Rivals had him a 5-star and ranked him the number 17 player nationally. 6'4", 240 last year, but he's going to be even bigger than that this year. He's got a big frame. He's going to play over 250 pounds for Virginia Tech. I think he's extremely athletic and twitchy. He looks like one of those types of NFL guys that gets picked in the first 3 rounds of the draft. That's just how he looks physically. I think at worst he's in the 2 deep, but I think there's a strong possibility that he's going to come in and start for Virginia Tech this year. I like Cortez Harris as well. Might take him a year to cook or something like that, because he's only going to be a redshirt freshman. Randy Adarica, another redshirt freshman defensive tackle from Miami, went to Penn State. He's a guy who I think if Tech plays 5 defensive tackles this year, he's got a strong chance to be in that top 5 group. I think he's pretty advanced for his age. He'd bring in some more size to Tech's defensive tackle room, which I think is important. There's a number of guys that they signed, but those are the ones that really stand out to me.
Yeah, I agree with you on Hilson. They took so many edge guys, and it looks a little different now that you don't have Morgan in that group. I wonder if they needed more help there. I mean, among the returning guys, who would even be the top returning guys in that group?
Asen Stevens and Jason Abbey.
Okay, and those guys they played a little bit,
but about 200 snaps.
We're not talking about APR here, right? Mm-hmm. In terms of pass rushing,
neither one's a
production.
The oldest, they're both redshirt juniors.
And they've been rotational people.
They've been rotational guys, but they haven't been counted on to be.
But those are the 2 oldest guys in that room.
Abby's been good against the run, very good against the run, but neither one of them.
But it's still an experience because they've been kind of guys who have come in to supplement the guys ahead of them.
Right. I don't really see a headliner in that group. Correct. So I think that's where they have to get the most done perhaps in the spring and figure out some guys and who's going to be in the rotation, who could be the guys you can really count on to get after the quarterback. I think this Curtis Jones guy is interesting. You look at his athletic profiles, like where are they going to play him exactly? Is he going to be?
That's a great question.
Is he going to be inside linebacker? Is he going to be an edge rusher?
Don't get Chris started.
Probably do some cross training.
Could he be a star? Like where does he fit in?
He played the bandit role for West Virginia, which is kind of like this hybrid outside linebacker edge role. I could see him playing star for Virginia Tech. I could see them moving him inside. in high school, he was a great running back. Almost all his high school film is of him as a running back, but his defensive film, he's playing both outside linebacker and inside linebacker. All I can tell you is he's a really good athlete who likes to hit. Besides getting over 200 snaps on defense for West Virginia last year, he also had 11 carries and 1 catch. They played him at running. What's that?
3 rushing.
Did he really? Okay. So he was like a short yardage back for them as well. So I don't know where he's going to play. I'm going to take a wild guess and say they're going to play him at star and wheel this spring and see which one he fits best, which I'm actually fine with the early portions of like spring ball. I just don't want to do it for a whole year. And surely you should not be doing it the week before the opener like they were doing with Kelly Lawson a couple before the Vanderbilt game. I
want Chris to show up in spring practice midway through and just go out there and be like, now's the time where it stops, guys.
Right.
No more rotating.
Today is the cutoff point.
Just hold up like a sign that says no more rotating. And that's the end of it.
Draw a line in the sand.
At the risk of getting Chris going even more here, like how do you feel like those middle linebacker spots are going to shake out? Keon Wiley is the guy they brought in the portal here. Chambers returns. Caleb Spencer comes back. You lose Caleb Woodson. How do you see those inside linebackers?
There's not really like a natural Mike in there, I would say. Not like your traditional Vince Hall, Jack Tyler type of Mike linebacker. Wiley's played, multiple linebacker roles for Penn State. I think Spencer was really good against the run last year. He was just a little bit undersized and missed some tackles as a result and wasn't good in coverage at all despite being a former safety, which was odd to me. A safety moves to linebacker and is really good against the run but can't defend the pass. But that was Virginia Tech football last year. You can't really try to figure that out. But I think we'll see some guys like
What do you think of Chambers? Where is Chambers
played Will last year? I could see him playing either one. I think he was basically a Mike.
I don't think Pry cares about like designations there. And you even look at what he did with Micah Parsons. Yeah, I don't know if you know this. He coached Micah Parsons
really
in college at Penn State. He moved him around all the time at Penn State, I think. And I think it's actually one of the complaints that Penn State fans had about him when he was the coordinator there. But I don't think he looks at this as black and white as you do in terms of positions, and he's going to mix and match and sees guys like he could play here, maybe he can play here, we're going to try him here, and you could develop over time. Maybe you started at a Will or a Star, and then you develop into a Mike. And if I remember correctly, the Will is the more complicated of the two.
I wouldn't say the Will's on the boundary. The Will is basically the old backer. So Xavier DB position, and the Mike is the Mike, the middle linebacker.
Yeah, but I want to say when
they
described it in the past, when they described Pry's system, if that's indeed what they go back to, I thought they said that the Will was the more complicated of the two inside positions. So again, we haven't talked to anybody about what kind of scheme they're going to run.
We don't know that's going to be the scheme.
Technically, the only thing we know that Brent Pry is officially hired is because we got a FOIA request back.
That's right. I mean, we know the staff
because of safeties coach,
because of these open records that
but they haven't announced it.
But they haven't announced anything yet. But furthermore, beyond that, Pry gave up reins of the defense and kind of let Sivkas experiment with some things in terms of how they use the safeties, different kind of defensive line positions they had. Is he going to continue to use that in his defenses going forward, or is he like, no, that didn't really work, I'm going to go back to the old way of doing things? That's one of the questions I have for him when we finally get to talk to him.
I think they're going to go back to the old scheme, but I think he'll be a little more fluid with how he uses his safeties, because I thought that was fairly bland. I think
Sivkas did a lot of interesting stuff with his safeties.
Right, and you just couldn't tell it because
they didn't have
all
much
got hurt or transferred.
Well, it's funny because they brought in all this safety depth and then 4 weeks into the year,
and eventually had to move a guy they recruited as a linebacker to safety.
Well, after that NC State game, Christian Ellis makes the game-winning play, and then all of a sudden Virginia Tech has no safeties for the rest of the year.
And now he's going to be playing for the Virginia Cavaliers this coming season. That's college football.
Yeah. So with that, let's round out this defensive discussion with the secondary, which you guys just mentioned last year was brought down to the bone in terms of who they were able to really work with, having to play freshmen and players who maybe weren't quite ready to go. They bring in some experience from maybe a lower level but are ready to play in the secondary.
Jaquez White was a former JUCO, spent 1 year at Troy, played really well. Only had one game against Power 4 competition. That was against Clemson, but he allowed one catch for 1 yard in that game. Granted, the Clemson offense was not the most advanced in the world this past season, but he'll stop Ryan in and start. Kenny Woosley out of Penn State. He was in the 2 deep as a redshirt freshman this past year. Got over 200 snaps at Penn State. That's really hard to do because Franklin did such a good job recruiting there, and he redshirted almost everybody. God bless him. So it's really hard for like a young player to break into the 2 deep and see legit snaps at a school like Penn State, and he was able to do that. So he's going to play a lot for the Hokies. Chadwick is listed as a corner. I list him as a cornerback / safety from UConn. He's got experience at both positions, and considering Virginia Tech's cornerback depth, like they've got proven players at cornerback, and their lack of proven players at safety, and the fact that they're going to be probably have a nickel on the field more, or potentially more now. I think Chadwick will play safety for Tech. That's where I think he'll end up, and nickel is also a possibility because he's been a really good tackler.
Yeah, I think you mentioned White, adding him to that cornerback room. I mean, look who you have coming back there. You got IBM's coming back. Thomas Williams is coming back. Jojo Krim, young guy who's also coming back. And also Josh Clark,
Yep.
who honestly, I thought could have factored into the rotation last year, and kind of disappointing that he injured himself in the spring and didn't get a chance to play because I think they were very high on him. So all of a sudden you have some experienced options at cornerback where last year they didn't really have any experience at those spots. Thomas Williams is kind of learning on the fly as he was going there. You lose Lovett early in the season to the portal. He wasn't even an option for most of the year. I'm curious. I'll throw this out there. Who's your starting 4 in the secondary this year?
IBM at one of the corners, Jaquez White at another corner, Reddish at one of the safeties, and Chadwick at the
You think Chadwick?
Safety. I think I would play him at safety.
Yeah,
Just try to get my best 4 players.
Yeah,
on
and
the
I
field.
think he's
Over Tyson Flowers?
Yes.
Yeah, Flowers struggled a lot last season,
yeah,
but it's hard to tell because the guys around him were so inexperienced.
Everybody needs a kind of a reset after last year. Where I don't think. For Virginia Tech's last 2 safety coaching hires, were both Virginia Tech graduates with basically no coaching experience when they were given their jobs. And I don't if they had been West Virginia graduates or Clemson graduates or Florida graduates, would Virginia Tech have hired them in first-time coaching roles like that with major response? Probably not, right? So I think Virginia Tech needs an experienced safety coach, and then we'll be able to judge the performances of the safeties a lot better. And but I think Flowers is a guy who will factor into the 2 deep, but I don't think he played as well as I thought he would this past year. I know somebody whose football opinions that I trust pretty well went back and watched his film at Rice. Is that where he came from? And said he wasn't that good at Rice either. So,
well, I'll say this: last year, Flowers was the one they identified almost immediately.
Yeah,
as being the guy they liked, it to the point that when I requested a few interviews in the spring, and I think one was Cam Selden or something like that, because the intrigue around him, and they're like, "Well, we'll give you Tyson Flowers too." I didn't even request him, and they gave me the interview with him, and he was actually a really interesting guy to talk to and sit down and talk to. Extremely polite, and they trotted him out a lot. And I appreciate this. In a losing season, he would come out there repeatedly as a spokesperson after games and taking questions. So they're not easy questions. It's you lose however many straight they did at the end of the season. Those aren't fun press conferences to go to and talk in. And he came out and he did it every time. So I think, from Pry's perspective, and again, he's still in charge of the defense, he identified him pretty quickly as a leader on that defense and the guy that they were going to count on. So I don't know if I would discount him necessarily this quickly. Also, I think it'd be interesting with IBM. There's so much talk about him at nickel last year, and he ended up playing mostly just like regular cornerback because they needed it. I wonder if with some options now, if he slides back into that nickel spot more full time and they develop other guys on the outside. I don't know. Just sort of spitballing at this point.
Well, I think Thomas Williams played so many snaps last year. You got Clark back, and I think they feel really good. They're high on Deloach and Knowledge Harrell behind them.
I think JoJo Krim.
I think for me, Knowledge Harrell is a nickel.
It's I
love the way he played in high school. He
was a nickel last year behind Reddish. I think was ahead of him, but I think Krim showed some things at cornerback too. But Clark, I think, is the one I'm really especially curious to see how Clark does out there this spring.
Yeah, but they've just got so many quality players there. A lot of them are young, but I think that's the difference, as you were talking about, Chris, between there and safety. Because at safety, you've got Quentin Reddish, who's coming off of an injury. Tyson Flowers is obviously back, and as Andy said, coming off being a leader of a defense that didn't play well. But besides that, you got Jordan Bass. Sherrod Koval didn't play much. Bass, of course, changed positions.
I always forget about Koval, that he's even still around.
And then 3 young guys in Brennan Johnson, Sheldon Robinson, who played very well.
Absolutely.
And then Tyrell Grant, who's coming in as a freshman. So it's just like, if you had like a scale, the cornerback safety scale, it would just be so heavily weighted more towards cornerback.
Yeah.
I think that's just, they're so much stronger there, and you've got to kind of balance that
and
out.
Bass might be more like a star linebacker in the spring. Remember, he was a guy they were going to play inside linebacker last year in redshirt.
Yeah.
And then they got
He could still conceivably redshirt if they wanted to.
Conceivably redshirt. If he came to me, he took one for the team last year. He wanted to redshirt. And they said, well, we don't have any safety, so we need you to move back to safety, which you hadn't played since high school, and not redshirt. He did it. Not a great performance last year at all, but not his fault at all. If he came to me and was like, Coach, I would really like to redshirt this year and finally settle in on a position for the first time in my career, I would be inclined to say yes to that. But
if you're the coach, it'd be like, hey, we'll pay you for 2 years.
Yeah, that's exactly what
you
I'd
can
tell
come
him.
back. You can get an extra year of payment out of this.
Yep.
If I'm Bass, I'd be like,
I might consider that.
Just put me in a spot and let me develop and get my body right for that one particular spot. I think that would be preferable.
If you remember, he was also coming off an injury.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. He wasn't in a good position to factor in a whole lot last year, which is why he was going to redshirt. But instead, he ended up starting at safety. But I think they'll take a look at him at star this spring, assuming they go back to the old Pry scheme and there is a star position.
It'd be nice to ask about it.
Yes.
Well, we'll see how it all shakes out. Those are all additions to the team. Also worth mentioning, Nathan Totten, a punter from Marshall, will get into the mix. So it's clear that Virginia Tech.
David's all about Totten over here.
Dude, man.
Yeah.
I love
He's chomping at the bit to
I
get
love
something
special
in
teams.
there.
I mean, and Chris wrote this in his article that came out earlier today, but it's like anybody needs a punter. But like when you can pick up a guy who is an all-conference player, like that's a really good pick.
Hopefully they don't have to use him as much as they have their last few punters.
Well, that was certainly a big addition, and they got talent from all over the country. But here's a word from our sponsor, Lunch Pail Ventures, who has a network across the globe.
Hi, this is Bud Foster. I want to tell you about something I'm really proud to be a part of, Lunch Pail Ventures. It's a community built by Hokies for Hokies, bringing together alumni, investors, and business owners who believe in building something bigger. Lunch Pail Ventures creates access to private investment opportunities and connects a growing network of Hokie entrepreneurs. It's all rooted in the Lunch Pail mindset: hard work, teamwork, and giving back through investing, events, and community. If that sounds like you, learn more and join us at lunchpailventures.com. And go Hokies.
Well, thank you, Lunch Pail Ventures, for sponsoring today's video. And while there were plenty of additions in the portal, it is worth noting some of the losses that you guys mentioned, such as Caleb Woodson, Tucker Holloway, Cam Selden, Christian Ellis, and others. Are there any names that the team might truly miss this next season?
Yeah, I think Woodson.
Yeah, they could conceive.
The guy's going to Alabama. Like, there's obviously talent there, and he had a bad season from the get-go. The DWI arrest right away after you're a team captain. If they're an inauspicious start to the Virginia Tech 2025 season, that was it. On the eve of the season, having one of your captains get popped like that, not a great thing. He had an injury that he battled through, and he came back, and he played okay. But I think the potential was there long term, that if you develop him, I look at the athletic skill set, he has experience in the system. That's a guy that if he came back, I think he'd obviously be a starter. So I think that's one you look at and you go, you definitely lost a starter in that spot.
The other one I look at maybe is Isaiah Spencer. I think he
could have factored in.
Yeah, and I think
he didn't wow me this year at receiver.
No, but Tech special teams was so bad that he never had an opportunity to return punts. I mean, there were a couple games Florida State where they didn't force a punt, and so it's like he fills in for Tucker Holloway, and he never really got any opportunities. But he was a shifty guy. He made some plays. There's a lot of guys on that list, though. It's like didn't really pan out. Like I look at a Micah Matthews, who was a dual sport guy and was in the baseball dugout, but was not on the baseball roster because of some issue, and like played in the spring game, but never factored in on either. He was a 4-star athlete for both and never factored in either sport.
Was redshirting this past year and didn't go through fall ball for baseball because he was redshirting in football. So just like I said, you can't, because of the way the calendars fall, you can't play baseball and football at this level. So he's just wasted a whole year of college. And he basically hadn't been in he hadn't hit a baseball in 2 years now because he was like hurt his senior year of high school.
It's tough to do football, baseball. That's a weird combination. I feel like football, basketball, maybe a little bit, but even that's tough to do.
Yeah, it's a lot harder these days. You can maybe do it later in your college career once you've already developed physically and you've picked up, the mental aspects of the game. Like Brian Randall played basketball at Tech, but it wasn't until like his junior
Jeff King.
You're right. It wasn't until later in their college careers when they were already physically developed and they knew the offensive systems for football, and they weren't going to get any bigger or stronger at that point with the weight room. And even a guy like, y'all don't remember this guy, but it was a football player named Billy Hardy when I was in college. He played on the baseball team for one spring, but again, that was like his 5th year.
Yeah,
I think baseball works better if it's like a pitcher. Right. You're like, okay, well, I'm coming in as a relief pitcher or something like that. It's not as everyday hitter. You got to be in the cage every day and pitching. There's sort of days that you do more of your regimen and stuff like that. In terms of outgoing transfers, some of the early ones I think on this list that transferred in the middle of the season are perhaps some of the bigger losses on there. I think, Dante Lovett, I think he was all right. I think he had a chance to develop into somebody here. It wasn't quite there at that point, but he also kind of left so early in his career relative to his starting experience that I don't know if you saw enough of it. Tucker Holloway, we saw his punt return ability when he had some blockers.
Do we know where he ended up?
Florida Atlantic.
Okay.
Michael Short was here such a brief amount of time. I don't even know, but he ended up at TCU, pretty good place to land. And
let's hopefully they're
Sonny Dykes.
Sonny Dykes is on the hot seat, buddy.
Considering the last 2 coaches were fired.
And Christian Ellis, he made the play and then transferred. Now he's at UVA, so that's an interesting dynamic there. A guy going to the rival like that.
Yeah, I think as Andy said, a lot of those guys were like. That's why the season kind of went down like this. I mean, obviously they weren't playing well, and you lose pride, but like. They lost a lot of key pieces. And I think you look at this list and it's like you lose 2 quarterbacks, kind of expected to lose them. Cam Seldon, and Isaiah Spencer, I think, are the other big names. But otherwise, it's like depth offensive linemen like Hans Hammer, who never saw the field, Carter Stallard, who was here for a year, at cornerback, linebacker, maybe some depth guys. But besides that, it's kind of, I think, what everybody expected.
I would say on paper, the input greatly outweighs the outgoing players here.
The quarterbacks here going to UMass, Pop Watson, and UT Rio Grande Valley for Garrett Rangel, which I didn't realize was
shout out Nick.
They moved up to FBS somewhat recently. No, D1. D1. Okay. I don't know anything about it, but I mean, it just kind of shows you like quarterbacks will go anywhere where they can play and get on the field, and I don't blame them.
Yeah.
If you're a guy who sat on the bench for a couple of years, you're like, I got to play. And
we'll
laugh at a place like a quarterback going there, but it's like Cam Ward was at Incarnate Ward.
Absolutely.
And now he's in the number one pick in the draft and Heisman Trophy winner. I mean, some of these guys just need an opportunity to get on the field.
Right. And at that position, it's not like there's a rotation. It's not like you can go somewhere and play 200 snaps as a rotational defensive tackle. No, you're either starter or you're not.
You can be a legend by being a backup who never gets on the field at quarterback because your stock will rise so much and everybody hates the starting quarterback. And you're like, this guy's incredible. He doesn't play. How can you tell if he's awesome?
I can say this now because we know he's not going to end up there. But do you remember that rumor that Pop Watson was going to end up at UVA? And I was sitting there thinking, what if he went to UVA, started, and beat Tech? He would be the only player in the history of the world to win a game on each side of that.
Pretty
rivalry.
Amazing.
Yeah, that would have been pretty amazing. Not that I would have been rooting for that to happen. But.
Another guy, not really a big impact guy because he got hurt, but Caleb Brown. Did you see he went back to Hawaii? In the college basketball world, we call that a Michi because Michi Johnson went from South Carolina to Ohio State. Back to South Carolina.
That's right. That's exactly right. Now there. I have no idea what Hawaii's NIL program is, but there is a lot worse places to be in the world.
There are ancillary benefits of being in the Hawaii football program.
So we've laid out the pluses and minuses, so we have a good idea of what the roster may look like. So with all that being said, where do you think the biggest improvement was made on this team?
It's really hard to say because I think they just about improved everywhere. I think the running backs will be about the same. I think I think pass blocking on the offensive line at left tackle, they didn't have a true left tackle this past year, and as a result, they had to start a redshirt freshman who wasn't ready at right tackle. So I think the pass blocking will be a lot better this year, and on quite frankly, quarterback play in terms of natural passing of the football will be tremendously improved.
Yeah, I don't know if I'll go with a specific position more than a concept. I think they improved in depth. And I think that the depth of talent across the board at pretty much every position group got better. And that's what's neat. If you're 3-9, you're not a quality depth football program. And I think we saw that with some of the departures, some of the injuries they had last year. They were starting guys that, probably weren't ready for that role. This is a situation now where you just have to upgrade the entire roster talent-wise. It has to be better. When you're 3-9, that's the case. Are these guys ready right now? Perhaps not in some spots, but I think you give time to develop over the years. They'll be in good shape. I think there are a lot of spots now that if the starter gets injured or is not performing adequately, you can go to the backup and maybe have as good play or a better play as an option there. So I think they need to upgrade the talent just across the board on the roster, and they did that with this.
I look at quarterback. It's going to be much different because you're not going to have a run-heavy quarterback like you did for so long with that previous scheme. But Ethan Grunkemeyer, man, I think he's the quarterback of the future for Virginia Tech, and the keys are in his hands. And you've got a quarterback's coach that knows him very, very well, an offensive coordinator and a head coach that know him very, very well. And this is kind of your guy. And Virginia Tech fans got to learn how to spell his name correctly because you're going to see it a whole lot.
There's an E in there between the Gronk and the Meyer.
It's not, but it's not like drunk and not. There's no N. Yeah, it's drunken.
I am having trouble saying Druckenmiller and then going to Grunkemeyer back to back. Like in my mind, I cannot separate those two. I think you're just high on Grunkemeyer because you were right on the buy sell that Carter had early on in the process. So you're gonna come back to that over and over. I would trumpet that. I'd be carrying a sign around that said I was right.
Though, I think Chris, you brought it up that 69% completion rate would be a single season record.
It would, and like I said, I went back and watched every snap, every drop back for him at Penn State this past year. They did run a lot of screens. They also ran this rocket motion with a wide receiver across where he basically handed it off to the guy. But
one of those
it's a pass, but it's a pass.
But it's a pass, right? that helps the completion percentage. But again, that's good coaching by Penn State.
That looks a lot like a jet sweep. I don't know if we like that in Blacksburg.
Rocket motion, much, much different than jet motion. But I think it says a lot, though, that I like the fact that a couple of those coaches that I think had a hand in putting him in a good position, not putting too much on his shoulders too early, are now at Virginia Tech.
Yeah, I think they had a good process with him. And I thought I'm sure you saw this watching the film, that they kind of added more to his plate as the season went on. Yep. And he obviously faced some really good defenses. Indiana, and it seemed like he faced Clemson.
Well, he was the best player on the field in the bowl game. Now, granted, there's a bunch of opt-outs in a bowl game, but he looked good.
Yeah, I think you saw him continue to progress and not just get better, but continue to learn and read the field better. And he's obviously still a very young player, but this is a guy you can build your entire team around. And I think you saw them do that in the portal.
Watching that tape, I was he was making some throws in between safeties and linebackers and throwing perfect timing on the deep out to the opposite hash. And I forgot that those throws could be made.
So those are all additions. Are there any holes remaining or maybe spots where somebody's going to need to step up?
When you're heavily focused on young players, there's 25 guys in this class, and only 3 of them are seniors, right? And I think it will make Virginia Tech better next year. They're going to be a better football team next year, no question. But they're going to, on paper, will be even better in 2027, maybe even 2028. So I think some fans would argue that maybe the balance is just a little bit off. Maybe they signed too many redshirt freshmen and maybe could have signed 2 or 3 more proven seniors at a key spot like Mike linebacker or something like that. That's a great graphic that Nick has on the screen right there.
What does Virginia Tech's photo class imply?
So I think Virginia Tech is little more into win later mode in this particular portal class with Franklin, but they will be better now as well. And you got to remember that these are portal guys for Virginia Tech fans, but for Franklin, they're honestly high school recruits, because he did recruit so many of them in high school. So to Franklin, they're not really portal guys. They're guys he's already been coaching, guys he's already known since they were 15, 16 years old. I wish Virginia Tech could have gotten a proven inside linebacker, of course, with 700 snaps in his career, 1,000 snaps in his career, more than that maybe. And maybe like a defensive end that we knew would be able to start.
I think the edge rusher is where I look at it the most. And not to say I don't like Hilson's potential at that spot, but he doesn't have a track record of doing it at a high level or putting in up big stats. They've had that before. Like APR didn't have a ton of stats. He came along at the end of that one season in Florida, and you look at it and you go, yeah, this guy's going to do pretty well when he comes in here. Ben Bell, for as many roughing penalties as he still had a lot of sacks last year too. He had a history of getting to the quarterback. I don't know if there's guys that are that proven in this group. That's not saying they can't do it, and they won't develop once they get on the field. I just don't know if we know the answer right now and who that will be.
Yep.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So this sets the table for the now and the future, in which there already seems to be some expectations for this season. We look at this way too early top 25, and the Hokies slid in there at number 23. Where should the expectations be for this season?
So is that they're only the second ACC team on that list?
Yeah,
what I'm saying.
Miami and Virginia Tech.
So put the Hokies in the ACC title game next year already. I think the portal on3 portal rankings, I think they do a better job than the 247 portal rankings because they factor in the guys that leave and how talented they were. So according to on3, Virginia Tech improved its talent level quite a bit when you consider the guys that left. They were not well thought of at all from a talent perspective for the most part. That being said, when I look at this list, I'm just going to go through it right now. Redshirt sophomore, redshirt freshman, redshirt junior, redshirt senior, redshirt sophomore, redshirt freshman, junior, redshirt freshman, redshirt junior, redshirt sophomore, redshirt freshman, redshirt freshman, redshirt sophomore, redshirt freshman, redshirt freshman, redshirt freshman, redshirt freshman. Redshirt sophomore, redshirt freshman, redshirt senior,
a lot of red shirts on
junior.
You don't need to point to the sign.
Senior, redshirt junior, redshirt sophomore, redshirt junior. There's a lot of guys in this class with multiple years of eligibility left, and some of these highly ranked guys in the portal rankings won't be quite ready to cook yet. And even Grunkemeyer is going to be playing his best football in 27 and 28. I think that might be a little bit early to say number 23, but I think the ceiling of this group of players is very high. I think they will be better next year. I think they'll absolutely be better. I think they can win 8 or 9 games next year. I think it's possible. Certainly can. I'm pumping my brakes on the top 25 talk right now, though. But I can understand, though, why people would think that.
Yeah, it's a little generous. I'll let you in a secret. I did the top 25 AP balloting 1 year when I was at the Roanoke Times. I left. I didn't get to do it after that. Once you get to Team 20, like 20 to 35, 40, those teams are all kind of the same.
Exactly.
Like there's a lot of warts on every team.
Did one of them lose this past week?
Right,
and the other
like
win?
even 18 to 25, it's like, well, who's the flavor of the week that I can put in there? They're coming off a great win, and like that's why I hate the college football playoff. They're like top 25 wins. So they're like, well, Alabama beat Missouri, who's number 25, and Miami lost shameful games to SMU and Louisville. It's like, what? They're like 26 and 28. They're just out of the top.
Right.
Like, these are the same types of teams here. So I hate it when they talk about it like that. So, you put Virginia Tech 23rd, you could probably easily have them 30th on that list. I think it's, bigger picture, it's interesting that Virginia Tech would even get mentioned in that conversation coming off a 3-9 season.
Same thing for Florida. Next to Virginia Tech,
and a lot of it might just be brand power. You see some of these schools up there that maybe don't deserve to be up there. That's an annual tradition in these type of off-season things. So, it's interesting to be ranked up there. Maybe a little generous in my opinion, but again, there are a lot of teams in those last 5 spots, especially that you could argue.
Look who's number 5.
Is Penn State really going to be the 14th best football team in the country next year?
Where was Iowa State going to rank before that? Because that's basically where you're ranking Penn State right now.
I would guess so.
With few additions.
Look who's number 5.
retentions.
Indiana.
Yeah. I mean, that's just.
So do we? Ole Miss is 15th. Do we know who's playing quarterback for them next year?
And we technically don't know who's playing quarterback for Miami yet. Yet they're
technically
top 10.
right.
Well,
right.
So
I look at this, Riley, and I go, I think it shows you how much this roster has improved. Like under James Franklin, like he's completely transformed it. But at the same time, there are a lot of questions still, like a lot to be answered. Andy touched on the defensive end depth. Like if something, you need more than just Hilson. Hilson can be really good, but you need another guy. Like where does that come from? Who's going to step up? Do they get another guy? Morgan would have helped there. But they're just a couple different, I don't want to say like gaping holes because they're not that big, but it's just like little things here and there where it's just like if you had one more player here, you'd feel a little bit better. And I think this staff, Chris, you mentioned how a lot of these guys are guys that they recruited out of high school. Like I look at some of the offensive linemen, guys Matt Moore had connections with. Justin Terry played for Matt Moore. A lot of Penn State guys on this list. Guys that Sean Spencer was familiar with from his time at Texas A&M or before that, right? They know these guys. But that doesn't mean that they're going to, like we still have to see how they all come together and mesh. And I think there's a lot of talent. You look at industry ratings and whatnot. It's like, yeah, this is a much more talented team, but at the same time, it's like we haven't. Spring ball, I think, will tell us a lot about like where this team should be heading into like July, August, about where people are projecting them because I think they've gotten much better just on strict talent, but like how it all comes together is the more interesting piece.
And also take into account how garbage these preseason, like way too early polls. I mean, to start last season in August in the AP poll, wasn't Texas number 1 and Penn State was number 2?
Right, something like that. Yeah, I believe it was.
Yeah, Penn State fires its coach a month in.
Was Wake Forest picked last in the ACC and they won 9 games?
Well, I'll say this much: nobody had Indiana number 1. They probably didn't have Indiana, Miami in the national title game. So in this era of the portal especially, there's so much volatility with these rosters, and trying to judge it now before anybody's even been on the practice field in the spring or over the summer or have an idea how good these guys fit on each of these teams. People read it. That's why these things go up. I mean, people will read the heck out of these things, and we're talking about it right now in a podcast. So I'm being somewhat hypocritical calling it out on this whole thing, but these have proven to be pretty bad when you look back at them in hindsight.
All right, we're all revved up for that next season, but we are still 3 months out from the spring game for Virginia Tech, which has been announced to be Saturday, April 18th, and it is going to be free admission.
How about that?
Yeah. Great decision. Like, I will triumph that. I mean, I rip on them when they charge for this event, and I think it's a great idea to make it free. And you see, James Franklin's comments about it's like, I want to pack the house, and they're talking about, a full lane stadium with 65,000 would be the largest attended in the country, or among the largest in the country. That's a little wishful thinking. Like, it comes down to, how good is the weather that day, basically. It's like minor league baseball. Like,
last
how good
year
is the
it
weather?
Wasn't too good.
Yeah. What the weather is like is going to determine attendance, essentially. And if they get 30,000, I think that'd be amazing. Yeah. I don't think they get anywhere to a full house, but I think the key thing is with me, and I've always said this, is it feels like the spring is a great opportunity to introduce the team and coming to Lane Stadium to fans who can't normally get there. And if you're charging for that, then you're putting up a barrier to that. The parking, I think, was even more
I was going to say, they charged about $25 for parking.
So there was nothing in there about parking, so I don't know if that's free this year or if it's not. But making it free admission, I think it was just, you're making an investment on trying to get some new fans, especially kids. Yeah. I mean, if it's a nice spring day, I'd bring my kids to that and go out there. But if I had to pay $10 a piece for each of the kids that you're bringing in there, I probably wouldn't. So try to get them in there, get them young, and get them to start enjoying Virginia Tech football. Maybe you can develop fans further down the line.
The spring game can fluctuate so much. I remember my last year of college, it was really hot for the spring game. And it was so boring because it was backups playing that I actually nodded off and sitting in the north end zone with my friends. And then last year, it was freezing. It was like as cold as it is right now.
You could get any weather. There was that one time it got canceled because of rain.
A thunderstorm.
Yeah. You can get any weather mid-April in Blacksburg. So it's a roll of the dice for whether you're going to get great weather and attendance. If it's 75 degrees out, though, and sunny, that'd be a great thing to do on a Saturday afternoon. Just go out there and see it.
Baseball, softball in town as well.
Yeah, we'll be looking forward to that in the a little bit distant future, but in the not so distant future, what can we expect on techsideline.com?
I'm going to start a daily article on just my thoughts on each position at Virginia Tech now that the portal's just about done. I'll do a little more in-depth article on Grunkemeyer with some film and showing people the types of throws he can make. My normal Q&A on Friday. The positional articles will run me up through early February. Then I've got to come up with something new after that.
Yeah, I might take a look at the sort of formalize this conversation that we had about depth chart and like what the big picture might look like, because we haven't really written anything about these guys are definitely returning and all. They all have their run it back tweets and stuff like that. I mean, at this point, if you haven't tweeted it out, I think we're just assuming that you're coming back. The portal's closed. Yeah. For all intents and purposes. Semester starts tomorrow. I would imagine if we haven't heard yet, they're probably coming back. So I just kind of bring it all into a big picture of this is what it could look like competing for spots in the spring.
Lots of hoops. Well, I believe we're doing a basketball podcast tomorrow, Tuesday. But men are at Syracuse Wednesday. That's a big game, Q1, coming off a nice bounce back win over Notre Dame. I enjoyed your discussion on the SMU game the other day when I was still in Dallas, and women have Clemson.
What an angle on that shot that you got, that video.
Dude.
Like you couldn't have had a better angle.
Yeah.
That's even better than the courtside angle, or like the looking from the TV angle.
Yeah, that was ridiculous. I just
when you're filming it, are you going, he's going to make this? Are you just
look good.
Are you just record this just in case?
So the craziest thing is if you go back and watch the replay, because I was basically like staring almost straight down the line. He almost stepped out of bounds. He was like this close from stepping out of bounds when Hammond like kind of ran him almost onto the sideline.
That was the thing, is I didn't think it was bad defense.
No,
like he was on him and he made him take an awkward shot. He just hit it.
Yeah, but he's hit 3 game winners for SMU in the last 2 years. So
I was keeping up with their game against UVA. They're looking at the score the other day, and at one point it was like UVA was only up by 1 or 2 with like 10 seconds left, and I'm like, you better be up by more than that if you're playing at SMU.
Yeah. But no, lots of basketball coming up, and I think we'll do Talking with Teal this week too, right, Nick?
Yeah, Nick, what do we have on the audio video side of things?
Yeah, we're doing basketball video tomorrow morning, and then we'll record Talking with Teal in the afternoon. I might push that to Wednesday, so we've got a video per day this week. We're also going to start possibly student-athlete interviews again with the interns now that they're back. Super excited about that. And it takes a lot off the plate of people like Carter and David who have to host when they're not here. So super excited. And also hilarious story. So my parents went away for the weekend for their anniversary, and they stopped at Buc-ee's over in Harrisonburg. And they get out of the car, and my mom and dad are taking a selfie with like the golden statue of Buc-ee himself or whatever. And this kid comes up wearing a VT t-shirt, and my dad's like, "Oh, where do you go to school?" And he goes, "I go to Virginia Tech. I'm in journalism." And my dad goes, "Oh, do you know Nick Brown?" And he goes, "Yeah, I work for him. It's Sam Mostow, our softball beat writer." So yeah, it's just hysterical that Sam Mostow went up to my parents like, "Hey, can I take your picture for you guys so they can actually get a good picture with the beaver?" At
Buc-ee's, man.
Yeah, got their brisket tacos.
Well, good pick right there for sure. Well, thank you for watching episode 466 of the Tech Sideline podcast. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and refer the show to a friend if you haven't already. For Chris Coleman, David Cunningham, Andy Bitter, and Nick Brown behind the scenes, I'm Riley Klaus saying so long for now.